I've had a lot of people come to me after the presentation asking for a copy of the presentation. So what I'll do is I'll make a recording of the actual presentation and make it available, because a lot of the narration on the slides are not written. So, just giving the slides will not give you the full picture. So as I said, in the presentation, what I want to cover today is the Omni Sentient economy. What's going to be the impact on companies? What is the operational framework going to look like in the future? What does the organizational structure looks like in the future? What are the timelines eventually that each of us and every company are going to have to manage? And then we're going to start off with what's causing it. So let's jump right into it, and we'll go from there. So when we talk about an omniscient economy, we're talking about an economy where intelligence is embedded in every atom of the economy and of a company. So every portion has intelligence inside it. So we're standing in front of a 5-year hyper-exponential cycle. The question is, what's causing that? Now, to do that, we have to look back. Last time in history where we had 3 technologies that totally transformed the world was between 1900 and 1917. That was the car or the vehicle, electricity, and the telephone. And as we know, none of those actually converged or touched each other, but we know what impact they had. But they followed quite closely, on top of each other. Then we got computers and the internet, and after that, we're standing at a time where we have 6 what we call them converging clusters of technology coming together, and that's going to transform the world as we know it today. These 6 clusters that we have is, your autonomous, your AI, and I'm not going to go into these in detail today. I want to show you the underlying technologies that are beneath these. And just, I want to mention all this that I'm covering is covered in the book, The Great Redesign, and the detail, are unpacked in each of those. But the reason why we break these into clusters are that inside those, you have 25 technologies that is becoming mature in the marketplace. Now, we hear a lot about AI, and a lot of people talk about it, and AI is just one of those technologies. It is the most influential part of it, and we'll look at a few figures in a second or so, because it converges or touches all other 24 technologies. But the key here is that we have 25 technologies that are maturing, and the keys and the real impact here is what are the convergence between them. And I'll show you an example exactly of what I mean when I talk about convergence. But in each of these clusters, you'll then have the underlying technologies that are becoming mature. Once again, I'm not going to go into these in detail today. In the book, I do cover those. So if we then look at that and we then go further, we just look at 5 of these: AI, robotics, energy storage, DNA sequencing, and blockchain. Those 5 alone will go from 13 trillion to 200 trillion by 2030. So we can see the significant impact we're talking about here. Everything that we know today will be infused with this technologies. But as I said, it's the convergence that is really transforming industries. And by that, I mean the following. If we just look at this cluster I'm going to highlight on the screen now, right? Artificial intelligence, next gen cloud, IoT sensing with intelligence on the edge, blockchain, solid state batteries, and autonomous technologies. Those clusters will totally disrupt the automotive industry. Not just how we as consumers buy and use a car, but how the industry actually manufactures it and puts out those technologies, right? So as an example, your car manufacturers will go from making and selling a car to eventually end up selling rideshare. So the figures that we're seeing around is that for every 8 cars, we'll probably see 1 car. So we'll see a huge reduction in cars as autonomous comes in. So the question is, how do these companies transform their business models? So that the disruption is not just in how these things are getting made and used, but it's going up and down the value chain. And you'll see not one of these technologies specifically has got anything to do with the car industry. And that's the same thing we saw with COVID. None of the airlines in the world would have identified Zoom as a competitor before COVID, but we know what the impact was. So the key here becomes for companies to look at these technologies, look at your company, and look at what are these crossovers, what are these converging clusters that will affect my product, my company, and the way I do business. So convergence is key. As we said, AI is the biggest contributor and the biggest catalyst. And the reason for that is it's touching all the others, or converging with all the other 24 technologies that are out there. Now, just because AI, I'll show you a few figures and just why AI is such a big part of that. So economic impact AI by 2030, 19.7 trillion. And we see these numbers changing basically on a daily basis. It is really, I think, we are still underestimating the impact of AI overall. Annual growth, 36.3%. Once again, there's numbers that go beyond that. And job impact, we hear a lot about job impacts. How will AI impact jobs? But currently, and I heard a few numbers a couple of days ago that was really crazy. But the numbers that the market seems to have consensus is about 92 million roles will be displaced. But we're expecting and forecasting 170 million new roles. So we are seeing this transition again that will happen, as we go through that process. Now, this is probably the chart which is the most interesting for companies and industry, is what we call as the crossover point. At what stage does AI go from a cost to operation to becoming a net positive driver for revenue for the organization? And we can see that two of these have crossed over. Financial services and telecommunication IT has crossed over. Energy we expect to cross over this year. And then the last one will be construction, which will cross over by 2031. And we break it basically into three groups: your capital light, and data heavy industries. And then what we have is your industries that is moderate physical infrastructure. And then lastly, your labor intensive and human industries. But the key is once it crosses over, then it becomes economies of scale. The more AI implemented, the more money it makes, right? So that becomes key for us, looking at your industry and then saying at what stage is my industry going to cross over. Right. Now, this I found fascinating stats, and it's from OpenAI. In 2023, OpenAI had 2 million developers. Just to show you the size of the transition that we're looking at. 100 million weekly users and 300 million tokens per minute was being processed on the system, right? And we'll talk about tokens in a second and the economic impact of that and how AI is getting paid and accounted for. In 2025, today, OpenAI's got 4 million developers, 800 million ChatGPT users on a weekly basis, and 6 billion tokens per minute. So we're talking about a 2-year window maximum. And you can see the impact already, or year and a half window, and the impact that has had on that, and how fast this is accelerating. And this is OpenAI. We're not talking about Grok, we're not talking about Perplexity, we're not talking about other models. This is one of them. So once again, the acceleration we're seeing is just, we've never seen something like this before. So, Omni Sentient world, what does that mean? When we look at Omni Sentient world, we're talking about a world where we have digital and physical realms getting infused. What I mean by that is the future is that companies need to look at every aspect of your business, saying, how do I infuse intelligence into this part of my business? That might be your product, it might be your operations, it might be your people. But the question is, how do I add intelligence to my operation? And then what we'll find is, as you do that, your organization, your company, your product move from a responsive to predictive, and it changes everything. So by 2038, with outside of people, companies, government organizations will be managing two things: intelligence and energy. The first one is, how do I embed more intelligence in every aspect of my business or my organization? Second one is, how do I power that? And why energy becomes so super important is that the key driver for intelligence, or restricts intelligence or AI, is energy. So think about that. If I can bring my energy or cost of my energy input to near zero, let's say through renewables, my effective productivity goes through the roof. So imagine having a factory with intelligent machines powered by let's say renewable energy. I can have a factory that can run 24/7 at near zero energy input cost. You can see what that will do to my overall productivity. So the key becomes is huge potential, and that's why these become the two key things. And then the other one obviously are the people, which we'll talk about a bit later, is how do I bring my people along with me on that journey? How do I transform, retrain, reshape the people in my workforce, and how do I infuse intelligence into that workforce as well? But this becomes the key. Those are the two core focus points for any, as I said, government organization. So next is economic impact model. So we're starting to see the impact that intelligence, AI, and these technologies are going to have on my business, right? But now the question is, what does my business models look like? Now, when I talk about business models, I always jump back and saying, from a contextual point of view, let's jump back all the way back to pre-internet economy and just have a look at how these different technologies have impacted our already lifestyle and business models, and then we can start looking at AI and what that impact's going to look like, and where we go from the future. But linear business model, pre-internet economy, we had a very, very simple economy. Simple, obviously, back then we didn't think so, but we had an economy where I made a product and I sold the product, and typically it was within region, in town, in country. Then the internet came, and that started giving me exposure, started giving me a website, started giving me further reach, started helping me have a better reach from a supply chain as well. So it expanded my business. So it digitized my analog became digital. Then came the social economy. And the reason why we break that out separately is the social economy transformed information. Before the social economy, most of our information came from a newspaper, a television, or a radio. Then now we see that 80% plus of information and news is created by people in social media channels. So it's totally transformed not just how we consume information, but where information comes from. Then what we got the collaborative economy. Now what the collaborative economy did, it changed the service industry. Is how and where do we get services from each other? And that includes the business models going associated with that. But now we're starting to get rideshare, Airbnb. We're starting to get, and we'll see that economy expand, as we go forward. Now where we are is what we call the hyper-connected economy. Is how is everything connected, people, devices, and how do I connect with them on a platform basis? Next will be the machine economy, machine to machine. After that, we'll call it what we call integrated well-being or augmented humans, and then we'll have off-planet. So we know what's coming. But the key now for us is how do we make this transition from a company-wise, from a platform to machine economy, and what do I need to run my company, and how does that affect my organizational structure in this process? So let's deep dive just on this step and see what that looks like, and that's what we call the Omni Sentient economy, obviously, right? So, hyper-connected economy. What do we need here? We need humans and devices, and how do we connect those together? And how do we run business models? And how do I monetize that connection? Then on the other side, the machine, I'm going to have AI agents with autonomous systems. So firstly, on the hyper-connected side, I need two platforms in my company to run that, my transactional platform and community platform. Then on the AI or my machine economy, I need to add 7 additional platforms. That's your execution platform, autonomous platform, and the different platforms in to run and integrate. And we'll look at what we're integrating and how we integrate that in a second. But what we'll see future organizations, and we're talking about from now going forward, is a cluster of 9 platforms to run your organization seamlessly. We'll talk about why that's important and why we have the 9 platforms. But if we look at these platforms, and they'll all operate in unison, right? So you start with a foundation layer or a protocol layer, and we'll talk about why that's important. But that sets out the protocols for your autonomous, whether that's autonomous agents, your actual machine economy that'll operate in unison related to the outcome, your protocol layer foundation, right? Then you move into what you call intelligence and execution layer, where you have 2 platforms that sit there, your data marketplace and execution platform. Then we'll move into the coordination layer, your services mesh and your transaction platforms. We'll then move into what we call the simulation layer. That's where your digital twin sits. And then finally, you'll get to your platforms that are touching your clients, your community, your users, as well as the autonomous side, the machine to machine, because you will have in your company autonomous agents and machines that'll do business to another agent and machine. So you need both those platforms at the top end, but these work in unison and they work together. Right. So now let's look at what is going to be that transformational economical phase, and what's the business models that these 2 unlock for us. So on the first one, hyper-connected economy, this is where we are right now. So when you look at this, you'll see where are you in your company, where are you currently at, which of these have you got working, and then maybe what do you need to do next on that, right? So the first one is in the hyper-connected economy, our focus is IoT integration, digital equity, smart contracts, and community-centric, right? And that will just increase as we go forward. Then what we have is the business models is as a service business model, your co-ownership business model, digital equity, circular economy, experience economy, and then obviously community monetization. So these are the business models we're starting to see Most organizations are as a service. They haven't really started looking at co-ownership. They still, digital equity, those are still pretty new to a lot of organizations. Then when we move to the machine-to-machine economy, this is where it gets really, really exciting. And this is when it really starts to get transformative, especially on our mindset, because we typically are built for this left-hand side. We are struggling when we get into the machine-to-machine side and having let go. So what's the focus here? We have AI agents, robots, and machines that are going to marketplace and will go and do business. You have device-to-device and AI-to-AI transactions that will happen, and then your trust value verification becomes absolutely crucial to run that as you go through that. And then when it gets to the business model, this is when it really gets exciting. When you build this, now you'll sit with a structure where you can have autonomous commerce taking place in your company, which means is your AI agents or your machines will go negotiate, transact, and optimize the supply chain. Whether that's up your supply chain, down with a product or a sale, this will be automated trade that will take place. Self-governing platforms, your DAOs, your smart contracts, and distributed ownership. And why that becomes key, that's going to start changing the ownership structures with tokenization as we go through that. So that layer becomes essential because your future shareholders will become token holders. And that might be part of your community ownership, and who is part of ownership of your business. We'll talk about that in a second. But that's going to change. Then you'll have your digital twin at scale, your synthetic providers, and obviously your economies of intelligence, which determines then your value, not the work size or your size of your workforce that goes. But you see how it totally transforms the current structure there. But we have to now build organizations that can accommodate both these structures. Okay. Now, Omni-Sentient organizational transfer. So we see the economic models. We can see what that looks like. Now we're going to look like it. What does that mean for my organization? Now, to do that, once again, we look at where we are currently. We currently have an organization that's built on a pyramid system, a top-down layer, a layered command and control system, coming from the industrial age. The problem we have with that is we know that we tend not to get the right messages getting through to our clients, and those messages are not getting back up. And we know, and we're not going to go into those today, or all the limitations in this model. I want to show you what the new models look like. But to start off with, this is the new challenge we have to cover off. We now have to build an organization where we have humans, AI agents, and intelligent infrastructure that can operate independently but seamlessly aligned towards the same mission. How do they work as one unit? Now, firstly, before we do, let's look at who is it going to be our human stakeholders, who's going to be our AI agent stakeholders and infrastructure. Humans first. So you'll see the big shift that I think typically humans used to be either our workforce or potentially our clients. That was our narrow focus around humans that we looked at that. But suddenly your humans is going to be every human that touches your organization, right? So you're talking about your employees, you're talking about your partners in strategic alliances, you're talking about your customers, you're talking about your community contributors, and your investors and token holders. And what you'll see in a future economy is your customers become token holders, i.e. investors and owners in your business. So we'll see that a lot, and I'll talk some examples of that as we go through. Your AI agents, what we talk about there is your AI agents, your digital twins, your machine APIs, your smart contracts, your bots, your algorithms, and these are all automated and AI, or intelligent automated agents. And then lastly, that's where you have your robots, your IoT infused intelligent sensors, your vehicles, your drones, your smart infrastructure, but that's your intelligent infrastructure that can operate on its own. So the question is, how do we get all these to operate in one unit? And you've seen earlier what I was talking about is the 9 platforms. But this is what the future organization looks like. It goes from a pyramid to a system where the CEO becomes a signal caller, sets out the protocol layer. You then have the humans, your digital stakeholders, which I just showed you, and your machines aligned to that message, and the entire system then operates with those 9 platforms. And that's how you connect this entire organization together, and they work seamless and execute, which means that your AI agents and robots will go and execute, not come back for permission. As long as they're aligned with the signal, with the protocol output, they will go and execute, and they'll keep on executing as they go through that process. Right. Now, what does that mean now for our workforce that we currently have? So currently, your humans are core operators, right? Your digital support systems, your digital and your support and your connecting tools. That's basically what digital infrastructure does for us today. And your physical infrastructure delivers in isolation. So that's what we have right now. Now, in this new organization, these roles change. Your human become an AI-assisted orchestration. That's what so they are managing the AI implementation and orchestration and operation. Your AI agents become autonomous operators, and then your infrastructure become intelligent. Your physical infrastructure becomes intelligent, autonomous participants in this whole economic model that you have. So you can see how the roles change. You can see why this structure cannot operate in your typical traditional pyramid structure that are there. So what does that mean for our organization? We go from a layered command and control system to distributed, self-orchestrated intelligence. Centralized decision-making moves to real-time, augmented responsiveness. Your fixed roles and manual workflows, they work from fluid, autonomous, hybrid AI human execution. Then you see real-time bidirectional signal feedback loops, and then design for ability, emergence, and context. So you can see how we're transforming from a static, very controlled, layered system into an autonomous system that operates around the outcome that needs to be achieved that are out there. There's 5 phases. I won't go through this. How do I take my company that I have right now, and how do I transform it into this new company? Steve Jobs showed us that with Apple, and I cover that in detail in the book that are there. Now, timelines. So where are we today? What do we have to manage? Where do I start? How do I transition my company through this process? We're basically managing 3 timelines. So from today through 2030, we are going to do our intelligence transformation. This is your AI intelligence agents, your digital platforms, your algorithmic workflows, and digital currencies. Those are the key things you have to start putting into your company from now to 2030, and that will redefine how business is getting done. So there's also nothing stopping you right now to execute that. All the components are in place for you to start implementing those key workflows. Then the next timeline you're managing is going to be what we call the physical transformation. Now, this is where we still have resource restraints, right? So we still have limitations on resources. So we can't go and build 1 billion robots today. We still have resource restrictions. There's still some technologies that we are working on, like solid-state batteries, that'll transform the industry. So that's going to be your clean energy transition will be key to that, which will make us, much more productive. Your advanced machine manufacturing and robotics, and then your autonomous infrastructure. So these becomes the key things. But like I said, that's a 2038 timeline. We have some time on that, and then that's rewriting the physical foundations of the economy. But you can see that's limited resources. And then the third timeline is what we call bridging technologies. That is from now all the way till 2038. So if I want to implement a robot in my company today, I need a platform, right? Whether you have 1 or 100,000, you need a platform. So this is your IoT, AI intelligence IoT. So right, edge intelligence. You have your blockchain, your Web3 infrastructure, which becomes foundational to set out that protocol layer. Your quantum computing, which will blow all this stuff up, and then your coordination platforms. And this will accelerate both timelines. So the key is now to say, where am I at my company? Where am I in my intelligence transformation? What are the key roadmaps there? And remember, not just how do I transform my company related to my operations, my product, but also my people, right? How do I infuse intelligence in my people? How do I transform them on that journey? Then your physical transformation. So you look at that and say, okay, if I look at my physical infrastructure, where do I start with that? So firstly, you'll say, how do I improve intelligence? How do I embed intelligence in this physical infrastructure? How do I make it more autonomous in that process? And then eventually, how do I get my energy cost to zero? So you look at your entire organization that way and saying, that builds my roadmap from my physical transformation, which you start building now, but the transformations all the way till 2038. And then you're bridging technology. So that's the 3 timelines all of us are managing in every company, depending on what it is, what industry you're at, what your crossover points are. That's going to be the timelines that you are managing. Right. And I always like ending saying that inaction will not kill you. It'll just erase you slowly. Your company will become irrelevant if you do not go through this transition. Now, I've mentioned the books. There's 2 books that I have. One's The Great Redesign, that is all these new infrastructure, and then the initial one was called Infinite Futures, which talks about this transition that's coming, all the impacts, all the technologies that are there, and they're available at the retailers. Happy to DM me if there's any questions. Happy to cover questions and have a discussion around this. Really exciting. The future is there for all of us, right? The key for us is to really look at ourselves, look at our company, saying, where am I at? What do I need to transform, and then embrace this? It's the most exciting time to be alive. Have a great day.